I'm Amber Jacques, and I'm the elementary principal in Lone Tree, and I am the evaluator, and I have Jen Wright here, who is the career teacher, and she teaches 3rd grade here. We are doing our post-observation conference for the I Evaluate course, and we are going to get started and going through the lesson that I observed. Ms. Wright, I just want you to start by, first we're going to review some of the district expectations about evaluation, and then I want you to go ahead and start reviewing about the lesson. But you are on the 3-year rotation, and so that is why you will be having 2 observations this year, and we will meet at the end of the year to go through the final comprehensive evaluation. What I'd like for us to do is start by you going through and reflecting on the lesson that was taught, and I want you to start by telling me how you felt the lesson went.
Before I do that, I would like to talk a little bit about the standard, the Iowa Core standard that we were addressing.
Okay.
It was the introductory lesson for the 3MD3 standard, which is requiring that the students are able to draw a scaled bar graph and pictograph, and then solve 1 and 2-step problems. And this was the introductory lesson for that. And as far as the lesson goes, my goal was to have the students to be able to collect data using a data table, tally marks, and then turning that into a frequency table, so that we could use that further in the lessons that I would be teaching, so that they had relevant data that was meaningful to them. And as far as the lesson for that day went, I felt like my students were actively engaged, and I could tell that because they seemed to know what to do. They were confident with the task. I think I also modeled fairly well so that they were able to see what they should do. And the one thing that I wish I would have done differently was I put a lot of teacher ideas for what they could be collecting data on, and they didn't pick up on that, and so I maybe would have saved time by not putting as many teacher ideas in and getting more information from them as far as what data we should be collecting.
Right. Just to go back to when you said you were what standard you were teaching, can you tell me then that standard, what you do with that standard with the students? You've told me about the standard. Do you talk to the students about the standard?
So that day when we introduced it, I have the standard listed on the work that they were going to be doing, and then I have it posted in the classroom as well.
Okay.
And then on that particular lesson, I let the students know that was what we would be working on. Something I am wanting to be better at is continuously bringing it back to that as a big idea or a goal that's what we're doing.
Good. So we talked a little bit about reviewing the lesson. Can you tell me what you would consider the strengths of the lesson to be?
Again, the engagement part of it, I think the students were very engaged, and I think, again, that's because they were confident with the task, because I modeled it, and because it was meaningful for them. I felt like my classroom management was pretty strong. I had some things put in place as far as getting their attention, like when I say class, and they respond back to me, and and I've set up prior to the lesson that it's a safe environment for working in. So when students didn't have partners or weren't sure if they were going to work in a partnership, it was open that students could approach each other and ask, and then also that they could ask for help. So I think setting that up in advance was a strength of mine.
Yeah, I had collected a little bit of data about the kids that worked independently compared to the kids who maybe chose to work with a partner, and you had a couple with groups, but all of the behaviors and when they were what their decision was going to be were all very positive, and there were no reactions to other kids as far as being negative or saying that they didn't want to. So yes, I would note that as a strength as well. How about were there any concerns, or are there any concerns that you would have had during the lesson, or that you did have during the lesson?
I think I was concerned about everybody actively engaging themselves, and in fact there was one student who seemed like he wasn't sure if he was going to work by himself, and I didn't really redirect him, but I helped him get into the group and kind of join in with the group. I was a little concerned about that because I do have a student who has a hard time with group work, and but he managed to do fine. And then I had also been concerned about whether I was giving too much information out that didn't maybe focus specifically on that goal, because I knew that it was going to be hard for them to also put a title on their frequency table, and that was difficult for them to do. That, and then when I've addressed that in later lessons, but that was a concern that I had as well. And I wasn't sure about the amount of time that I modeled versus the amount of time that maybe students were modeling during that time. So I think if I were to do it again, I would probably have the students maybe model a little bit more after I noticed that they were confident with how to use a tally and how to collect data. I could have had them do a little bit more of it.
Okay. When we're talking about the students working independently, or well, they're all working independently, but some chose to work by themselves and some chose to work with a partner. So one of the questions that I had throughout the lesson was, how are you going to know that the students who chose to work with a partner grasp the concept that you were trying to teach?
The students who were working with partners, especially, I've made sure that in later lessons that I've met with them in a small group and they've been asked to do that task as well.
Okay.
Independently, or with me there as support for them, but that gave me an assessment of whether or not they were able to do that. And I felt like all of them were able to do the collecting data using tally marks effectively. It became more difficult when we had to get into later lessons as far as giving the graphs an appropriate title and that kind of thing. So.
Okay. You know that I have a special education background, and so I'm always concerned about how we're meeting the needs of all kids. And so I know that you have a couple kids in there with IEPs. Can you give me some reflection on how you feel you differentiate for those kids, or how the same goal was met with those kids in the classroom?
Well, actually, that's something that I do want to work on, is being able to differentiate more for them. At that time that I taught the lesson, they were not in the classroom. They were pulled out with a special education teacher who knows of the goals, but at that particular time, I had not said that she could be, or that the student should come to the classroom. I just hadn't thought about that.
Right.
As far as that being a time for them. Again, that's something I want to work on. But I do like to have the opportunity for students to work with partners. And then what we were doing was, I feel like, a lot more engaging as far as like speaking to one another, and using good communication. And I know that can be difficult for special needs students as well. So I try to have everything written down and on paper and that kind of thing.
So I just want to make sure that I heard you correctly. So you feel that this would be an area that maybe you could pay a little more attention
Absolutely.
to, and maybe, okay, I just want to write that down. Okay, I wanted to just point out real quickly some areas of strength that I noted, which were similar to yours on the Iowa teaching standards, that I felt that were met, or in the area of strength for you. I would agree that obviously you're teaching the core curriculum, which aligns with the district standards and district curriculum. The lesson that you taught, you had asked students to be able to come up with an idea of interest for themselves to be able to collect data on. And so standard 4E, connecting prior knowledge, life experience, and interests, was a real strength for the lesson as well. You used multiple means of technology. You used the smartboard, you used your Elmo, the dry erase board, you used a lot of different technologies, so that was great. I think that the way that you presented the lesson, where you provided modeling, you provided opportunity for question, and then you allowed the students to work independently. Standard 5D, using the instructional time, was very effective. This is another one that you commented on. I would very much agree with 6A, where you create a learning environment that encourages all kids, where they feel comfortable to communicate with each other and decide whether or not they want to have a partner or work independently. The other one that you also mentioned was developing and implementing classroom procedures and routines with high expectations. I have some data on that as well. I did mark down that there were 0 behavior redirections, and that I would agree that 100% of the students were on task 100% of the time. They did a fabulous job with that. And then using the instructional time effectively to maximize student achievement. And we'll talk about that with the artifacts later. And so the other piece of data that I wanted to share with you that I did not let you know about when I came in was one of the things that I'm looking for when I'm going in for teacher observations this year is, I'm looking for the level of questioning, the level of questioning that our teachers are asking. And so I just wanted to share with you that you asked the students specifically 14 questions, of which 9 were open-ended and 5 were yes/no questions.
And that was during direct instruction.
During the
okay.
teacher instruction. And when I went through and I even looked at the yes/no questions, I felt that your yes/no questions were questions of gaining confirmation from the students on answering the previous question. So you'd ask a question and you said, so do I start here? And they would answer yes or
so
no.
like clarifying
Yeah,
questions.
and so I thought that the ratio was, so about 66% were open-ended questions, which I thought was a good start. So I wanted to point that out. In the areas for improvement, which I believe that we would probably agree on this, would being flexible and meeting all the needs of the kids. One of the comments that you made was about having the special education children were pulled out during that time, and so sometimes during our planning we need to think ahead about what would they need in order to be successful with this, and thinking about that, and then just more strategies to be able to use so that all of those kids are engaged. So are there any artifacts that you would like me to look at from the lesson? I see that you do have some, and I guess when I said we'll get back to that data, what I was curious about was how many of the students you felt grasped the concept or mastered the skill from that initial day.
For the goal, which was using tally marks, to I feel like probably 100%.
Okay.
We're able to do that.
Okay.
Effectively.
Very good. And then where did you take the lesson next?
Well, we took the lesson. This is another thing that I guess I'm thinking about that I would have maybe improved, was we took the lesson where we gathered more data because we felt like the data that we were collecting was not going to lend itself to create pictographs. We weren't going to have enough data, so we collected data the next day with the other third grade class, and I probably would have maybe try to shorten that time a little bit so it wasn't as much data collection and more instruction on the next part of the standard, which was using that data to create their own scaled bar graphs and pictographs. But that is what we did next.
Okay.
We took the samples that they created that day, and the students in a table team or in a group, after instruction from me, we started out with bar graphs first. And we went through problem solving with bar graphs and creating bar graphs using that data. And then we collected data, again, the same way as this lesson that you saw, but for pictographs. And we did that around Halloween time, and we used different kinds of candy and Halloween bags. And then they created pictographs with that. Then we used the graphs that they created to help start the one-step and two-step problems. So it all started with the students' interest, and we tried to tie that in with, and when I say we, my teaching partner and I, we tried to tie that in with what we were doing for the rest of the standard.
Okay. So you've told me what you did to follow up on the lesson. So now I want to talk about, after reflecting and thinking about that specific lesson the day that I was in, if you were to do it again, if you were to teach that lesson again, what would you do differently?
I would say the following day I would probably spent less time on the data collection part of it and tried to find a way to work with what I was already working with instead of another 30 minutes of the next day. And I may have shown them, maybe show them in advance a lot more bar graphs and pictographs. They've seen those on their probes that they've done in daily work, but we've never really talked as much about the title and the labels and what those mean. And I think maybe front loading that a little bit and talking more about what the graph is actually telling us using the titles and having examples would have helped later when we started to do that. Because though that wasn't a primary goal for the lesson you watched, that was something that I felt like I could have front loaded more so that they would have been more confident when they took the titles that they created for their frequency table and then turned that over into a bar graph or a pictograph.
So I gave you a little bit of data about the questions that you asked, and just if you could tell me a little bit about, after getting those questions as well as the data, what does that information give you about how you ask questions?
Yeah, I was looking at that and I noticed that I say we So my pronoun a lot is either I or we. I don't ask the students you when I'm modeling, and I don't really know what that means.
Okay.
I don't, but I did notice that was something that I did more frequently, and that I do ask questions that clarify when students respond to something.
Okay.
And then I also wish I would have used it more. I noticed I use increments, and I do say X and Y axis. I was trying, and title and mass, which was tying into science. I was trying to use a lot of standard language and also connect it somehow to what we've been learning in other areas of learning.
Okay. And we also talked about the data for behaviors of students. And what can you interpret by the behaviors of the students during the lesson?
I can interpret that they feel confident, I think, with that task. I don't think what I was asking them to do was maybe beyond their confidence level, and so I think that part of it was that they were engaged that way, and that the task was meaningful for them, and so I would want to continue doing that. They were interested in what we were doing. I suppose that's another reason why. And yeah.
Okay. Well, in planning for the future, we want to talk about strengths for you to continue to reinforce or exhibit in your classroom, and then we'll plan for improvement. And some of the strengths for you to consider to plan for, obviously we discussed about your classroom management, which is a really big strength, and continue to have your students be independent thinkers. What do you think are, can you name one other strength that you would continue to reinforce in your classroom teaching?
I would probably say the modeling, making sure that I'm giving a clear expectation when I'm modeling, and then allowing students to do some modeling as well.
Okay.
I want to continue with that. And then also continuing to use vocabulary as much as I can to help strengthen those connections with students.
Okay. And then for areas of improvement, planning for improvement, we sort of touched on this, but if you could again tell me what you feel are your areas when we should plan for improvement would be.
Planning for improvement, I would want to think about the question that you asked me about how do I know that the students really know that, and make sure that I provide lots of opportunities for independent practice with what we're working on.
Okay.
Because I just need to be cognizant of that a little bit more so I can engage with the students really know it. And we're starting to get there where the students understand that they really need to know it, and they really want to know it. So I don't have issues, I don't think, with people just copying off of somebody else. So I'm sure it happens sometimes, but I want to be more aware of that. But my biggest would be working on my time that I can collaborate for differentiation for students with special needs, and not just with students who have IEPs, but all students.
Right. Okay. So we've gone through the lesson. We've gone through some teaching standards, some data, strengths, weaknesses, areas of improvement. Can you just go back, and I want you to just tell me one more time to reflect on the strengths and the area for planning that we will be focusing on.
Okay, so my strengths, I want to continue working on classroom management strategies that maximize student learning and engagement, and I want to continue to have the students do more of the thinking and less teacher, not that I'm not thinking, but the students do, even with little things that they should be thinking about daily. And I want to continue using questioning strategies that promote that. And then for weaknesses, I'd like to work on my collaboration with special needs teachers, and then other students that I can differentiate for, as well as modeling. Yeah.
Okay. I have a couple of things for you, because I know another area of interest for you, which I also like very much, is continuous improvement in your classroom, but creating your classroom data center. And I know that you're taking that, and I even see your board outside your classroom where the students have created their own little data center. And so I have this PowerPoint that has a lot of great resources on it that may help you in that area. And then I know that you've seen this book and we've worked through this book, but I wanted to bring it to your attention again, and if you don't have it, you can take mine, but The Differentiated Classroom by Carol Ann Tomlinson. And so remember that in here there is a section that has many different strategies on how to differentiate in the classroom. And so this might be a book that you, you know, catch up on again before going and meeting with the special education teacher, so that you guys are on the same page and kind of using the same language when you're planning. So, well, I want to thank you for your time, and I want you to continue working on that. And I loved the lesson, and it was a great.
We liked having you.
Yeah,
That was fun.
Yep. Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Rock.